This is an anemic domain model. It comes with many issues, some of which we will fix in this video. We call it an anemic domain model when a class lacks behavior and mainly holds data. We notice an excessive use of primitive types, also known as primitive obsession. That is another story which I will not cover in this video. We also note data clumps. We will be dealing with data clumps in this video, so focus on that. And the third issue is the lack of behavior. There are usually no methods on an anemic class. We tend to define the methods in the services layer instead. And so we begin addressing the issues. You better get ready for some tough questions now. I expect you to have at least a basic understanding of what the anemic domain model is. You should be familiar with the ideas of code smells and refactoring, and your mind should be open to different approaches to writing classes. Am I asking too much from you? By the end of this video you will understand what kind of damage data clumps usually cause. You will then learn how to improve your code's robustness and maintainability by removing data clumps. I will also share with you a link to further learning resources at Brilliant, the sponsor of this video. So let's begin. This is an anemic class. Calling it anemic sounds like it has some blood disorder, but in reality it lacks the richness of a proper domain model. We only call it that way. And then the data clump. We call it a clump when several variables come together. This class is modeling a book. The data clump is part of it. Wherever these values go, they go together. That makes them a clump. Those values come together in the constructor as well. It is only possible to call a constructor by supplying them all. The same happens when calling a service. I told you that the anemic domain model comes together with the services layer. This service method creates a new book entity in the database. It should not surprise you to see all the values in the clump coming together in its argument list too. And that is only the beginning of our troubles with this anemic class. From this point on, we will start noticing the consequences of having a data clump. The first downside is that values in a clump affect each other in all ways possible. Watch this. Imagine you are employed in the book publishing business. You are trying to schedule a book release without knowing the exact date. This uncertainty can lead to planning chaos which is just about to begin. When set to false, this last variable indicates the book is not published. The publication date can then be left null. That means there will be no day and month in such a non-existent date. Now, this is already confusing, isn't it? On another day, true will indicate you are dealing with a published book, so there must be a non-null publication date. However, the day might not be specified. These values tell the book was published in May 2023. It goes along the same lines in the case of the book we know is planned for publication in 2027, with no specified day or month. The point is that none of the values in the data clump has a meaning without the others. And then it gets worse. Much worse. This interconnectedness of all things becomes vitally important in data validation. It is a common practice to start the constructor with data validation. Besides validating individual values, we also have to validate the combinations of values. A published book with no publication date is invalid, so we throw. Having a day but not the month is invalid too. We throw again. This code fails in so many ways that it makes my brain hurt, and it will only get worse. This enormous potential to fail floods over into the services layer. The data clump is bringing all those throw instructions with it. The service can now fail in all the nasty ways you saw in that constructor before. So I made the service private. How unfunny. Is there a word unfunny? A service so bad I don't want anyone to call it. I exposed the whole bunch of specialized public services instead. Each method hides one combination of values in the data clump. This one creates a book that is planned for a year and month, but with no specified day. Look how carefully it constructs the clump on the caller's behalf. This call will never cause an exception. Half a dozen other methods cover the remaining valid combinations in the publication date clump. Can you imagine the brain-splitting effect this might have on the ultimate consumer of this service? All this misery started with a data clump. It is at the heart of all my troubles. I will now start fixing it. From this point on, the programming will become a satisfying activity. I can promise you that. Please note that you can download the entire source code before and after the refactoring from my Patreon page. Remember that every registered patron helps hundreds of fellow programmers watch all the videos on my channel for free. I'm genuinely grateful to all of you for helping me maintain this channel. I will apply a few refactorings now. There will be several stages. It is critical that you understand the end result before we start. First, we observe that the entire clump models just one thing, the publication information. The plan is to make it one object. Is that clear enough? Yes, I know it is. Would you mind looking at the suggestions in the refactor menu? I'm searching for a refactoring called extract class, but it is not here. Unfortunately, Visual Studio Code still doesn't help with that. I will have to perform the extract class refactoring all by hand. It's even better because then you will see every tiny step it consists of. The first step is to introduce an entirely new class. Let's call it conveniently a publication info. Then put all those properties in there. Essentially, I'm creating the same data clump, but this time it is enclosed behind a single entity. That is the first step. The data clump will still appear in the constructor. The constructor would repeat all the guard clauses. It may look like I haven't accomplished anything with this. I will ask you to stay patient for 1 minute longer. That is all I need to get rid of all these throw instructions. Would you believe that? I notice that this class is now exhibiting a data clump of its own. These three values taken together form a full or partial date which is also nullable. Let me repeat the extract class refactoring, pulling out a class named partial date. This is the point where all excuses for throw statements end. Pay attention. I will set the properties for a private constructor. I don't want to throw ever. Then I add a safe construction method, the static factory method. That is one handy design pattern I use frequently. This one promises to construct a partial date which is in fact a full date with no parts missing. Fine, that is the partial date with both the day and the month specified. This static factory method will never cause an exception. Another static factory method would allow the caller only to supply the year and the month number. I would create the date-only instance for them. Then I will complete the data clump to be always correct. The day is missing, but the month is there. Do you see how this practice works? The last factory method I need will construct a valid instance with only the year number specified. You can also condense a constructor by applying the tuple literal syntax. I like this form better because it is now evident that the constructor does nothing but pure assignments. I find a lot of beauty in this portion of code. How does all this reflect on the publication class? We replace the entire data clump with one object. Please note that the date can be missing in this class, so I made the reference nullable. The constructor will only receive one nullable partial date. Then that maneuver begins with the private constructor and public static factory methods. Factory methods will create a published book, a planned one, and an unpublished one with no planned date. I hope you haven't fallen asleep watching this refactoring. I cannot stress this enough. The worst design you can create is an interesting one. It means that things can happen that draw attention. Some of those things will be bugs. I just like it when my code is straightforward. This class is still too exciting for my taste. Look at this code. It is scary. It will certainly be less scary once I substitute the data clump. An important note is due here. Did you notice how I made the setter public? Is that safe? What do you think? It could be safe because there can never be an invalid instance of that class. On the other hand, I might want to validate transitions. A published book should not be allowed to go into an unpublished state. If so, I might turn the setter private as it was and impose stricter control. Still, I want you to sense that new feeling in the air, the feeling of safety in objects. If you have an object, then it's fine, use it. Every object is internally correct. The rest is straightforward again. Remove the clump from the constructor. Remove superfluous checks. I have cut validation to half in one move. Set one property instead of 4. Do you like it better this way? I have deleted 20 lines of code by removing one data clump, and I plan to delete even more in the services class. These 7 methods were doing one thing in 7 ways. There were 7 valid combinations of publication data clump, hence 7 methods. But there can only be one way to pass a publication info. Therefore, it will be one static service method from this moment on. Don't worry about the compile time error. It will go away when I fix the private method below. Another batch of 7 methods covered a different option. One static service method it shall be. Then the actual private service, which creates a book entity in the database. Say farewell to the last appearance of that data clump. In the final version of this code, I have removed even these 2 static services by removing the last remaining data clump. You can download that code from my Patreon page. The message of this video is strikingly short despite the length of the demo. You can delete an awful lot of nasty defensive code only by extracting data clumps into separate classes. And then comes the puzzle for you. This class is now anemic, but it doesn't have to be. Can you turn it into a proper object-oriented class? That would involve removing primitive obsession, introducing methods, and spicing it with a healthy dose of polymorphism. Let that be your exercise. I will now give you a link where you can learn more about programming and everything that surrounds it. You can start learning right now for free by visiting the sponsor of this video, Brilliant. Brilliant provides deep learning in specific areas of programming, engineering, and science. Brilliant recently launched a ton of new data science content, all of which uses real-world data to train you to see trends and make better informed decisions. You will find thousands of interactive lessons in math, data analysis, programming, and AI. Whatever area you choose, Brilliant helps build your critical thinking skills through problem solving. And honestly, it is fun. There is a full 30-day free of charge offer for you. Follow the link brilliant.org/Zoran Horvat, scan the QR code, or just click the link in the description. That will also give you a 20% discount on an annual subscription after the trial period, so please make sure to use this link to unlock the benefits. And watch other videos on my channel about remodeling anemic classes into proper object-oriented and functional models.